Failing is a gift that alters us forever. My greatest fail, thanks to the questions I learned to ask after, is now the most brilliant guidepost in my life. Join me in the wilderness of Alaska, spring of 1995. I was living in a tent studying a glacier. Each day, I walked to and across that 27-mile-long river of ice to collect samples of rock and water. Each day, I was invincible. One morning, I traversed the ice through a fresh coat of snow, poking my ice axe at every step to ensure there were no hidden crevasses to swallow me up. After a long journey across, I put 24 water bottles on my back and headed for home. And I thought, Troy, you're a pretty smart guy. Safest way back, retrace every step. That was the last time I ever said, Troy, you're a pretty smart guy. You see, Sir Isaac Newton would have reminded me that force equals mass times acceleration. And those full bottles on my back just increased my downward force by 30 pounds. About halfway across, I took one wrong step. The ice below me shattered. 10 months after saving the life of a colleague by pulling him out of a glacial hole, it was my turn. But I was alone. 40 seconds was all I had. 40 seconds was all I had. If I couldn't scale those sheer walls of ice in that crevasse, I would freeze in that glacier forever. The next 5 to 10 seconds of my life, I will never remember. Seriously, I have no idea how I got out. But my bloody arms and hands were evidence that adrenaline made me climb like I never thought possible. But any celebration of survival was short-lived, as I had a long walk back, and my soaked clothes would start to freeze in the 20-degree air. Failing is beautiful and necessary. Failing shouldn't weaken us, but strengthen us. It shouldn't make us more afraid, but should fill our hearts with courage. Failing shouldn't make us failures. It should make us champions. That walk felt like an eternity. There were no cell phones, only moose and bears, but all I could think about was all the people that I wasn't nice to. All the loved ones I wouldn't get to say goodbye to. And the loss of everything I planned to do someday. The value I planned to bring to this world someday. Well, spoiler alert, I survived. But that was an experience I wouldn't wish on any of you, but I wish all of you could have. Because that single failure and the growth opportunities that came with it taught me more about how and why to live an impactful life than all of my successes combined. I am a scientist, so by design, I fail. We are humans, so by design, we fail. Have any of you ever had a spectacular fail? Nice. How did it change you? And did you ever look back later, after thinking the sky was falling, to realize that fail was lifting you up to something greater? For me, the common denominator in turning all of my magnificent mishaps into successes was just asking the right questions. And I learned many moons ago, literally, the power of asking questions. When I was 7, my parents bought me this, my very first telescope. And I remember the first time I turned this telescope to the moon and saw that the moon wasn't a flat disk of gray and white, but a fantastical three-dimensional sphere of mountains and valleys and craters. And for every question I got answered that night, 100 new questions to explore filled my brain. The very act of questioning made my world enormous. So by junior high, I was making the world enormous for others by delivering planetarium programs and telescope observing nights to a curious public. And I learned that inspiring others to ask questions fueled my passion even greater. And so I packed up this little guy, and 14 years after we met, I was off to work on the most powerful telescope to ever peer into the vastness of space, NASA's Hubble Space Telescope. And while there, I went to every school that I could to talk about this most influential marvel of engineering human hands have ever created. This telescope that would change our lives for the better by helping us understand our universe. And I was shocked at the number of kids who had never seen or looked through a telescope. And as much as I loved opening up that new world for them, I was equally haunted by one recurring question from adults. Why did we just waste $2 billion on this orbiting piece of junk when we could have spent $2 billion feeding the hungry or clothing the homeless? I knew the answer. But at 22, I couldn't get it out sensibly. I failed every time. But it was then that I made it my life's mission to give every kid the opportunity to fall in love with science and technology with their hands, their minds, and their hearts, just like I did. And to show every adult how science and technology make our lives better every day. Soon, I was working around the country helping technical industries build up their future workforce. Healthcare, IT, manufacturing, aerospace, and so many other companies saw the average age of their engineers approaching 60, and up to half of their workforce eligible to retire over the next decade. And we knew that for these companies and our communities to thrive in the 21st century global economy, our kids needed to become our future innovators. And knowing that 3/4 of the jobs that today's kindergartners will hold don't even exist yet, our children truly have the power to invent the future for us all. So, if you ask yourself, how do I create a community of innovators? You realize every innovation, be it a farming tool, an electronic device, a work of art, an airplane, has 3 key ingredients: imagination, curiosity, creativity. Now, luckily, we all share imagination. Imagination can launch us to distant worlds or drive us toward a better version of this one. Do you all agree that we don't use our imagination quite as well as we did when we were kids? I am constantly wishing I had my 9-year-old's imagination, but equally wondering how I can pour jet fuel on his curiosity to fully unleash his creativity and innovation. And the answer comes simply. Give everyone, including yourselves, permission to fail and the freedom to ask more questions. That's it. Toddlers are great at asking questions. No, dear, you cannot eat glue. Why? Oh, because it'll make you sick. Why? Oh, because there are bad chemicals in it. Why? Because sometimes people make things to better our lives, but they're just not safe to eat. Why? Because it's glue! Now stop asking questions! No. Don't stop asking questions. That's your greatest power. Studies show that 4-year-olds ask on average between 75 and 125 questions a day. I thought you might get that. They do that to explore and understand their world while we help them make good decisions. But eventually, those questions start to diminish due to several factors, including frustration by adults, lessons in school that focus on answers, not questions, and the concern for asking that one stupid question. Fear of failure sets in. Curiosity, creativity diminish, and soon we all stop asking questions, some by middle school. As adults, we ask 6 questions a day. From 125 to 6. We lose our childlike passion for exploration and discovery. And so this question just spins and rattles in my head. If fear of failure stops us from asking questions, but asking questions is the key ingredient from turning a fail into a success. To build a community of innovators, how do we inspire more fearless questioners and glorious failers? I'm sure you've all heard, probably said to you, don't let your failures define you. Quick question, do you feel more like you are shaped by your successes or your fails? For me as well, I am not defined by any bio of outcomes. I am a mosaic of all of my fails, bits and pieces of various shapes and sizes that I constantly have to scoop up and fuse back together toward a better me. Perhaps you as well. When I was 2 years old, my brother and I used to play bullfighter. He would hold up the red towel and I would run through it. Well, one morning in my grandmother's basement, he held up that red towel and I charged, not noticing the cinder block wall on the other side. This lump on my head is a daily reminder to not trust what I cannot see. When I was 6, I was flying down the hill on my shiny new bike and I learned what the front brake was for. After that accident, this tooth was hanging by a root. So the doctor, to save it, jammed it up in there. Backwards. Still backwards. A trophy for learning to always read the instructions. And from the glacier to all of my fails, I am different and better than I would be if I only tasted success. And how about you? And how about our crazy kids? Studies show they become resilient and work harder when things don't go as planned. They question, they think critically, they build humility in the face of failing, and self-confidence and grit in their quest to triumph over it. So let's encourage our kids to try most everything. If they fail, cheer them on! Our future leaders need to know that failing isn't an end to be lamented, but a new beginning of learning and growth to be celebrated. Now, perhaps you're asking yourself now, how do I make this practical in my life? Well, let me give you a few examples of how my family has found joy and learning in recent fails. When my daughter spilled juice all over the floor, we explored its changing shape and spent about 5 minutes wondering what that might look like in zero gravity. When I broke a glass on that same floor, we studied how that impact could have possibly created that cool pattern of cracks in the glass. And when my son came crying because he got hit in the head by his sister's paddleboard, after 5 deep breaths, we celebrated the fact that he was going to be the smartest kid in the lake because he learned the situational awareness to keep his cranium away from the oncoming board. And then I said the words that I say after every one of our fails. If that's the worst thing that happens today, it's going to be a great day. And by the way, these principles will work really well on adults too. It might take a little more practice, but it is equally as empowering. I want my kids to push the boundaries, to have beautiful accidents, to be failures, not failures. Failures give up. Failures say, I tried really hard and that just happened. What can I do to learn and get better? Can you imagine a world where every child and adult viewed failing not as a weight to push us down, but as another rung in a ladder to help us climb upward? We can all make that happen by helping every child and adult diminish their fear of failing to the point where their desire to be their best selves always wins the day. And that's what we're doing at the Air Zoo. An aerospace and science experience with over 100 airplanes and spacecraft and rides and flight simulators and interactive exhibits and silver lab coats. So we started by creating a culture of questioning and failing. Every team member must be a fearless innovator who questions everything, has succeeded wildly, and failed gloriously. Our drive to impact our community must always eclipse our fear of failing. And we failed in every aspect of our organization. But we've asked questions, we've learned, we've celebrated. And over the last 5 years, we've grown our impact in our community by over 40%. And I think this culture can be beneficial to all organizations, regardless of size or industry or mission. But externally, we want every interaction with our guests to begin with a question and foster a thirst for an answer. We teach kids potential and kinetic energy of airplanes by having them build a roller coaster to get a ball down a track. Inevitably, they fail. But they ask questions, they use their creativity to innovate toward a good solution. And then we dance. Kids use chemistry to create rocket fuel and other crazy concoctions. It is awesome to watch kids astonish themselves. When was the last time you astonished yourself? And the Air Zoo is the only museum in the country that invites schools and public visitors to work on 2 World War II aircraft that have both been on the bottom of Lake Michigan for 65 years. Every time a family comes and works on this rudder or this cockpit canopy from an SBD dive bomber that served at Pearl Harbor and in the Battle of the Coral Sea in World War II, questions are sparked, skills are learned, history is made and remade, and we want these experiences for everybody. The bottom line is this: we want to inspire every child and adult to become the innovators that our communities need to thrive in the 21st century global economy. And you all can help make that happen. No matter where you are in life, find a pathway to exploration for you, for yourselves, your family, your friends. Immerse yourselves in nature. Do experiments. Build things with kids out of recyclable materials. Ask questions. Try something you never thought you could achieve. Fail dazzlingly. Learn and try again toward unmeasured success. Ladies and gentlemen, the future of our communities needs dreamers, fearless questioners, glorious failers, innovators, leaders. So let's encourage every child and adult to ask questions. Prepare them for their inevitable fall into their own glacier. Inspire them to climb out, look back and say, I failed, and I'm better for it. Thank you.